So the other day I was on Instagram just kind of like scrolling through like I do from time to time. And I kept seeing a bunch of these videos talking about the current dating market, about marriage, relationships, how everything's falling apart. And it had me thinking for a bit. So I was kind of looking at these videos, and one of the things I kept seeing so much was that there's this big, I guess, outcry from women wanting to get married, but they can't find the type of men that want to get married, or they find the guys that they want to get married to, but the guy won't commit to them. And so I'm going through these videos and I'm going through the comments and I'm giving my 2 cents. And a few girls were kind of chiming in and they were saying, like, well, if you were a girl, what would you recommend to look out for when it comes to getting married? Or what would you recommend as a solution to get men to marry you? Because in the comments, one of the things that I kept saying, and I think this is 1000% true, if you disagree, leave your rebuttal in the comments. I'm curious to see what other people think about this. But one of the things that I kept seeing, and one of the things that I think a lot of girls, at least that I see, do not understand is that, and this isn't true for all men, but I think for a lot of men, the idea of marriage is not that appealing. I'm not saying it's not appealing in the sense that no men at all want to get married. I think the point that I want to try to bring up, it's not the first thing that most men want to do. It's not a typical goal for most men. Most men don't sit there at the age of like 14, 15, or 16, or in their 20s or 30s, and they think to themselves, you know what I want to do today? I really want to get married. I really want to live that Disney fairy tale lifestyle where I find the woman of my dreams, we walk down the aisle, we get married, my mom or dad or whoever is on the other side waiting for me. I don't think men typically think that way. Are there some that probably think that way? Sure. Is that okay? Completely. That's totally fine. But I think in the grand scheme of things, it's more of a thing that women want to do and not necessarily men. And I think that's okay. I think if you're a girl, you shouldn't sit there and think to yourself that that's horrible. I think you should recognize that men and women have different mindsets about different things. Now, some of the girls in the comments were saying, what would you do if you were a girl to get a man to want to marry you? And I would say the first thing is recognize that most men aren't super interested in marriage. You know, for the reasons I just kind of outlined. It's not a goal. It doesn't offer that much benefit for a man as it does a woman. Now, I could be completely wrong about this, but I typically think that a lot of women like the idea of marriage because they feel like it's a sense of security. It makes something feel real. It makes the relationship feel real, and it makes it feel like a very concrete long-term thing, which I totally get that. I would disagree because, as you can see, divorce is over 50%. Depending on the resources or the articles you read, it could be about 60%, 75%. I've seen it be even 80% divorce rate. And that's not even considering that some people stick together without getting divorced, but deep down they might want to get divorced. So the whole idea of marriage in itself, making a relationship concrete and eternal, so to speak, is unrealistic. That's not a real thing. Now, with that being said, I think deep down most people understand that, and I totally still get the appeal that it feels secure and it feels like it's a beneficial thing, or it feels like it's going to be a long-term, eternal thing, and you feel like you're the exception to the trend. I totally get that. I think that's fine. That's not a bad mindset to have. But I will say, if I were at this very point in time able to snap my fingers and switch my gender and become a female or become a woman and try to get a guy to marry me, one of the things that I would first think about, there's a few things I would think about, but the very first thing I would think about is, one, what are the reasons why people get divorced, and how do we prevent that from happening up front? Because I think the thing a lot of girls don't understand is that a lot of men, and I'm not saying that, I don't mean this in a derogatory way, a lot of men rely primarily on logic to make decisions. They rely on their experiences, and they rely on the experiences of other people similar to them, so other men, to make their decisions. For them, it's not as, for men, it's not so much about how we feel about things, it's about how things could play out. It's about what's likely to happen. It's more of a probability type situation rather than a possibility type situation. Does that make sense? So in order for you to kind of convince a guy to get married, one of the first things I would personally do is figure out what are the reasons why a guy doesn't want to get married, and then make sure that he feels secure, much in the way a girl wants to feel secure in their marriage. Make sure he feels secure prior to the marriage. And I'll say one of the biggest things is finances. One of the biggest reasons, at least that I've seen, for people to get divorced is finances. People just don't have the money. And when they don't have money, they can't afford like basic stuff. And it becomes kind of this accumulation type effect. Oh, we don't have enough money to pay for the bills. Oh, well, my husband no longer can provide, so I need to find a new husband. Or, the kids no longer respect us because we don't have enough money to do A, B, and C. It's all going to be kind of situation based, but all of that is a money problem. At least that's the way I see it. So up front, as the potential partner, what can you do to solve the potential problems? Help him make money. That's one of the main things. Now, I've seen a lot of girls, they'll say, well, if I help him make money, there's a chance that he might leave me, or there's a chance that he might get too big, or he might make too much money and he might get rich, or, get wealthy, and then he'll ditch me. My response to that is welcome to all relationships. This is true of every single relationship ever, regardless of which side of the fence you're sitting on. If you're a guy, this is the same problem that many men have. If a guy gets a girl and she might be attractive, or she might be going to the gym taking care of herself, or she might be improving herself and getting more attractive or whatever, there's a chance she might leave too. That's part of a relationship. That's part of how things go. And that's something you're just going to have to mentally cope with and deal with and accept. And you have to understand, I think that's one of those things where it's like, you have to understand that if you get the partner, you need to also kind of be aware of a reality in which a partner might leave. I think that's just how it goes. That's just how relationships go. You have to be okay with that, if you're comfortable with that. Otherwise, never get a partner, because in order for you to get a partner, you have to be open to the idea that a partner might be willing to leave, or something might happen to the partner, or things might just not work out. Does that make sense? So that'd be the first thing I would think of is, what are all the main problems that could come up that would lead to a divorce, that would lead to risk for the man, and then solve those problems ahead of time. And like I said, one of the main things that come up is finances. Just help him make more money, or you together pool your money together so you guys can invest and make more money ahead of time. And then the money problems probably will go away for the most part. And because they've gone away, they won't lead to a long-term divorce situation. That's one of the main things. Second thing that kind of comes up is you're going to need to really sell the idea of marriage to men. And I think the reality of the idea of marriage is that it's great for a girl because she gets a lot of security out of it. And I'm not saying that men don't feel at least a little bit of security from it, but you got to look at it from a man's point of view. There's a lot to lose. There's a lot of risk and not much upside. There's not much that he gets from marriage that he couldn't have just achieved either from a general relationship or just alone by himself. Now, I personally think if I were a girl trying to get a guy to marry me, I would try to help him accomplish all of his primary goals ahead of time. All of the things that he wants in life, I would sit down, I would try to have a talk with him, I would try to figure out what his values are, what he wants, and I would try to help him get those things first. So at the very least, if you guys get married and if things go south, it doesn't feel like he's risked that much. It doesn't feel like he's lost that much. For example, kind of using the finances situation again. Let's say you're with a dude and you help him become, this is an extreme example, but like a multi-billionaire. If you started out together and he was making, say, 30 or 40K, and you helped him become a billionaire, even if you get divorced or even if things go south, he gained far more from that marriage than he's lost. Does that make sense? I think you have to apply that concept into the relationship. And I think the issue with a lot of marriages, at least that I see, is a lot of times the girl comes in and she wants to just get married, but she's not offering much tangible benefit to the man. She doesn't even know what the man wants, which I would say is one of the major issues. You should know what your potential husband wants out of life in general. But beyond that, even if you know what he wants, put effort into offering that to him. Put effort into giving those things to him, whatever those things may be. Now, of course, if you reach a situation where the guy tells you exactly what he wants and you don't think you can fulfill it, or if you don't like the things that he likes, then maybe you shouldn't be getting married. I would say that's the second part of it. Or I would say that's the next part of it. But in the grand scheme of things, if you find a guy you want to get married to him, I think you have to, again, don't take this in a negative way, but I think a lot of women take marriage as something that they're entitled to. Like every man should marry a girl because she wants marriage. And I think a lot of guys, nowadays at least, don't see much appeal to that transaction, so to speak. They don't see much appeal to that situation. You're a dude and you sit there and think to yourself, man, if I get married, that's a lot of money for a ring. That's a lot of money for the wedding. That's a lot of money for future kids. I have to buy a house now. I have to change my whole lifestyle to do something that I don't want to do in the beginning. There's several negatives and almost no upside. And even the idea, I know some girls might say, oh, well, he gets to have sex like consistently that's not even that much of an upside, especially because a lot of dudes, at least from my experience, when I've talked to a lot of men who've been married, they don't even say that the sex continues. It declines. And then two, and this is one of those things that I think a lot of girls just refuse to acknowledge, but I think it's kind of true. And if you're a girl watching this, you're probably gonna get upset by me saying this. A lot of men like to sleep with different girls. And I know some girls will say, well, we like to sleep with different men too. I get that. I don't think it's the same as men by any means. I think most women would like to sleep with maybe a guy that they're comfortable with. I don't think that exists with men. The idea of being comfortable with a girl before you sleep with them, I don't think is something that men typically, I'm not saying all men, but I think most men don't experience that. I think for most men, the idea of just sleeping around with a faceless, nameless girl that's different, that you know very little about, if anything about, is totally acceptable for most men. I think most men are okay with that. And I think most men would, to be honest, I think they would prefer that. So you're also restricting him in that area too. He can't really basically be himself in any way in the relationship. He's losing financially because he has to pay so much to get into the marriage. And he has a lot to lose financially if he breaks up with you or if he divorces you. From a sexual perspective, he's not getting anything that he wants besides maybe consistent sex. But even then, a lot of men typically like variety. So he's losing on that front. And from a just relation or from a social point of view, he's probably really not going to gain much from that either. Like, he's not going to be able to spend the same time with his male friends doing the things that him and his male friends would want to do anymore. So, like I said, I think if you're a girl watching this, just kind of my 2 cents, if you really want to sell the idea of marriage, and I think a lot of girls nowadays will really have to sell the idea of marriage hardcore. I would say if I were a girl and I were really trying to sell the idea to a man, I would, one, figure out the things that he wants to do with his life and just help him get that. Like, actively help him get that. Not just say I'll do it, actively do it. Real quick story I want to bring up. I don't really agree with a lot of the stuff Steve Harvey says, like his dating advice type stuff. But there was one movie, I think it's called Think Like a Man, that I actually thought was pretty insightful. And in the movie Think Like a Man, there's this one guy, I think he's like the player of the movie, because it's like a bunch of different dudes. And I think in the book, I don't remember exactly how the movie goes, but I think in the movie, the girl reads a book, and in the book, Steve Harvey's giving like his dating strategies for a bunch of different type of men. And one of the men is like the player, so he's giving his strategies on how to deal with the player. And in the movie, I think it's Megan Good is the actor. She's trying to date the player, and he reveals to her, and this was him being genuine, that he wanted to be like a singer, like an R&B singer at one point, but that endeavor never got off the ground. He needed someone to help make an album, and he never could find anybody, all that stuff. And so she says to him that she knows somebody, I think it was either her dad or like a friend, that could help him make an album. And so what she does in the movie later on, and this is the thing that really won him over, it was one of the things that really won him over, and I think this would actually work super well in real life, is she went out and she helped him, she made the album for him. He didn't have to ask her, she just made it. And she gave him the album. She says, look, I did this thing for you. I thought this would be a great gift. And I think that's it's one of those examples of simply just doing something to help a guy achieve a goal without him asking for it. Does that make sense? And I think that's something that a lot of girls, at least from what I see, do not do. I would say for one, a lot of girls don't know what the guy they're dating wants out of life. But the second thing is they're not willing to actually help him get it. And I think the key part is help him get it. And that's like a really active word. Like, you have to actually do something. You can't just say, we should do this. Motivation and encouragement is not an active thing. Like, saying words doesn't mean anything. You have to actively do something. You have to actually do some effort. You have to actually produce results. I think that by doing those things, you at least put yourself in a good situation to help win a man over. And I would say the final thing is finances. A lot of relationships nowadays come down to just finances. People just don't make enough money, especially nowadays in today's economy. People don't make enough money. People go through hard times. People struggle. When people struggle together, depending on where they're at in the relationship, the kids struggle, then the entire cohesion of the family begins to separate. And I think if you solve the money problem up front, then all those long-term problems go away. And I think by doing those things, you can at least mitigate the chances of, one, a divorce happening, but two, you can ease his mind, and open him up more to the idea of marriage. Because in this situation, if you help him solve his personal goals and his personal problems, and if you help him solve the financial problems that you guys are probably going to have as a family, there's not much reason for him not to marry you. You've made yourself stand out far more than any other girl he's probably ever going to meet. You've helped him achieve his goals. I think unless you're probably dealing with like a psychopath or some kind of dude that's just super selfish, in which case if he leaves, and that's perfectly fine, that's a benefit to you. Unless you're dealing with that kind of guy though, most guys I don't think are going to leave. I think most guys will be perfectly fine saying, you know what, when I met this girl, I was totally broke. I didn't have any of my goals accomplished, and she helped me accomplish my goals. She helped me do all the things I wanted to do in life. And she's become a net positive to my life rather than a liability. She's an asset. Why would I not marry her? Why would I not give her these few things, considering we have all the means to do so, and I'm satisfied with how my life has turned out because she's made it that much better? Does that make sense? So just my 2 cents, kind of my solution with this fuzzy video, kind of my solution to some of the different videos I've seen on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram whenever I see people talk about struggling to get married and struggling to convince men to marry them. So just my 2 cents. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you disagree or if you agree, let me know in the comments. I like to read what people say and chime in or debate people. And be sure to leave a like on the video. That helps boost it in the algorithm. But until next time, I'll see you next video. Peace out. Bye.